All right, let's take a trip back in time. We're heading straight into the heart of the Jazz Age to dig into one of America's most scandalous and, well, one of its most enduring cold cases. It's a wild story of forbidden love, a really brutal murder, and a trial that just completely captivated the entire nation.
So, it all kicked off right here. Picture this. A couple is just taking a quiet morning walk through a field in New Jersey. And what they stumble upon, it's a scene so absolutely shocking, it would dominate the front pages of newspapers for years.
And here's the thing, this wasn't some messy, frantic crime. No, the scene was staged, meticulously. It was almost like a ritual. I mean, the bodies were carefully posed, the man's calling card was placed at his feet, almost like a formal introduction. And then you have these love letters, torn up and scattered between them, basically spelling out the story of a secret affair that came to a horrifically violent end. The sheer brutality of it all, especially the fact that the woman's throat had been cut, it's just so eerie when you contrast it with how polite the scene looked.
So, the big question is, right, who were these two people posed so bizarrely under that crabapple tree? Well, once their identities came out, this whole thing exploded from a local crime into a full-blown national scandal.
Okay, so the man, he was Reverend Edward Hall, a really respected Episcopal priest from a wealthy, prominent New Brunswick family. And the woman, she was Eleanor Mills. She sang in his choir, and this is the crucial part, she was married to the church's sexton. You have to remember, in the super rigid social structure of the 1920s, this wasn't just an affair. Oh no. This was an explosive cocktail of class, religion, and secrets, and the whole thing was about to go off.
Well, with a scandal this juicy, you can bet the police didn't have to look very far for potential motives. The investigation pretty much immediately zeroed in on the people closest to the Reverend, namely his wife and her very, very powerful family.
So the prosecution's theory was built around a motive as old as time: a woman scorned. They pointed the finger directly at Frances Stevens Hall, the Reverend's wealthy and influential wife, claiming she was the mastermind. Her brother, Henry, who happened to be a former marksman, was pegged as the triggerman. And then there was her other brother, Willie, who they said provided the .32 caliber pistol used in the whole thing.
You know, Willie Stevens became this absolutely fascinating character in his own right. The prosecution tried to paint him as a key player in this conspiracy, but the defense, they presented him as this harmless kind of eccentric guy who couldn't hold a job and just hung out at the firehouse all day. They argued there was no way he was capable of this kind of violence, and the public, they absolutely ate up this contradiction.
So you've got these really powerful defendants, you've got some pretty shaky evidence, and the prosecution's entire case ends up resting on the shoulders of one single witness, a woman who just happened to live on the very property where the bodies were discovered.
And everything, I mean everything, hinged on one single question. Could this woman be believed? Her name was Jane Gibson. She was a local pig farmer, and the press, in that kind of cruel way they had back then, immediately slapped her with the nickname the Pig Woman. Now, her testimony was explosive, for sure, but her credibility was just relentlessly attacked, which made her, one of the most controversial figures in this whole saga.
So, here's the story she told. She said her dog started barking like crazy, so she rode her mule out to see what was going on, and that's when she saw 4 figures over by the crabapple tree. A moment later, she hears gunshots and a woman's desperate scream. And in that scream, she claims she heard a woman shout a name: Henry.
Okay, and if you think that's dramatic, wait for this. The trial's drama just hit a fever pitch when Jane Gibson finally testified. She was so sick that they literally had to wheel her into the middle of the courtroom on a hospital bed. A hospital bed. And from that bed, she delivered this absolutely chilling testimony, telling the court about the victim's final desperate pleas.
So let's recap, right? You've got a cheating priest, a possibly vengeful wife, an eccentric brother-in-law, and a star witness testifying from a hospital bed. Yeah, this was way more than just a local trial. It had become a full-on national obsession.
And just to give you an idea of the scale of this obsession, get this number in your head: 300. That's not 300 witnesses or 300 spectators. That's 300 newspaper reporters from all over the country crammed into this tiny New Jersey courthouse. Every single one of them just hungry for every last salacious detail.
And really, this is why the case is so important in the history of journalism. It's considered one of the very first, media circuses.
You had some of the most famous writers of the day there, people like Damon Runyon and Mary Roberts Reinhardt. And they weren't just reporting the facts, they were crafting this incredible, sensational story for a public that was just desperate for drama.
But then, after all that drama, all those headlines, after a 30-day trial that had the whole nation hooked, the verdict was just stunning. The defense did a masterful job of tearing Jane Gibson's credibility to shreds. And with her testimony in tatters, the prosecution's whole case just collapsed. Frances Hall and her brothers, they were acquitted. They all walked free. And just like that, the case officially went cold.
So, with no conviction, the Hall Mills case basically left the courtroom and entered the realm of American legend, which brings up a really fascinating question, right? Why on earth, a full 100 years later, are we still talking about this?
Well, the answer really lies in its incredible cultural footprint. I mean, this wasn't just a news story, it became a total cultural phenomenon. It inspired films like The Goose Woman, which was all about Jane Gibson's story. It helped establish the modern courtroom mystery genre. Some scholars even think you can see its influence in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, with all those themes of violent secrets bubbling just under the surface of high society. This case didn't just grab the public's attention for a month. It literally laid the groundwork for our ongoing obsession with true crime.
But maybe its biggest, most enduring legacy is this: the sheer volume of media coverage. The number of newspaper columns dedicated to this one single case it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before in America. It fundamentally changed crime reporting. It created this sensational, dramatic template for how the media covers big trials, a template that, let's be honest, we still see all the time today.
And so here we are, right back where we started, under that crabapple tree. A century later, there are still no answers. There's been no justice for the minister and the choir singer. And so the question that absolutely haunted the jazz age is still hanging in the air today. Who got away with murder?